So you want to invest in the stock market, but maybe you don't know how to get started. It can be kind of confusing. There's these small cap stocks and large blue chip stocks, and then you throw international stocks into the mix, and it's an entire another layer of complexity. So what if you could buy one thing and be invested in the global stock market? Well, that is what today's video is about. We're going to give a quick overview of the Vanguard Total World Stock ETF, ticker symbol VT. I'm going to walk through the high-level details of what this is, and by the end of the video, you'll probably have a better idea of how to get started, and maybe this is something you will consider investing in. Let's get started. Welcome back. I am so excited that you found my channel. This is Joshua Talks Money. Here I share all the lessons that I've learned and the ones I'm still learning about money after I built and sold my tech company, and now I'm focused really heavily on investing. Hopefully you can learn from some of my mistakes and some of the things I've paid quite a bit of money from professionals and financial advisors to learn. We share all of that on this channel, and I would love for you to consider hitting that subscribe button to follow along. I put out content like this every single week. And to kick things off, I'd love for you to leave a comment below. Tell me, do you invest in VT, or Vanguard's Total World Stock ETF? Is this something that you've heard of and that you own? Let me know in the comments. All right, so jumping to the computer here, we're going to start at Vanguard's website, where they give a full summary of what this product or ETF aims to accomplish. And if you're not familiar with what an exchange-traded fund is, I did a full video that you can check out right now. All right, so VT aims to give you exposure to stocks both in the United States and in foreign markets around the world. And really what this can do is capture the upside as different places around the world start to experience growth and innovation and appreciation in the stocks in those regions. But as you can imagine, there's also exposure to the downside. As I film this video right now, there's a lot of uncertainty around Ukraine and Russia, and we're not really sure what that's going to do. We know there can be some volatility towards that region, but also there could be some shockwaves around the global economy. And VT will really feel that across the board depending on how that shakes out. As I scroll down here, you can see there's an expense ratio of 0.08%. So that's pretty good, fairly cheap to own this ETF. You can see that they rate this with their Vanguard risk potential rating as a 4. So that is not as risky or as volatile as some of the other ETFs that we have reviewed on this channel. And I always like to look at the performance here, and Vanguard does a really cool job of this, where they show these graphs and give you this hypothetical growth of a $10,000 investment. So let's say that you invested 10 grand back a decade ago. Well, you can see that your money would have nearly tripled over that time had it been invested right here in VT. And that's pretty good. I think that stocks generally perform pretty well over time. And I think VT is a pretty broad and diversified way to invest in stocks across not just one country, but many countries. All right, so let's jump down here to the portfolio composition. And this is really fascinating to take a look at. You can see that North America represents 62%. Basically, 2/3 of this portfolio is concentrated to North America. And I'll explain why that is here in a moment. But you can see there's several other pieces here. The emerging markets, I've done a video about emerging markets specific ETFs, ticker symbol VWO. It might be worth checking out. But also things here like the Pacific and Europe. This is where you're going to get that exposure to these regions of the globe. But when we jump over to the top 10 holdings, you're going to see that most of these companies are familiar to you. In fact, 15% of this ETF is made up of these names that you may own or have considered owning in other types of funds like VOO or perhaps the QQQ, some of these things that we've talked about on this channel. Or maybe you just own some of these companies outright, like I do in the case of Apple, Amazon, and Tesla. And so that's pretty interesting because those companies just really have a big portion of this fund, but it's all the rest of those companies that really help you stay diversified. And if you look, there's actually 9,350 stocks in this single ETF. And let's think about what this means for a moment. Imagine if you bought just $1 worth of VT in a fractional share, for example. That means you're getting that dollar spread across 9,350 companies. That's really, really incredible. And so that is the broad diversification that VT provides. So how does VT compare to something like VTI? Well, this is a really cool chart that shows us both of these ETFs over time. As you can see here, if we go back to really the inception of VT, which is around 2008, and we look up through the current time here, you can see that there's a pretty noticeable divergence in performance as time goes on. And the reason for that is that the growth in VTI, which is the US stock market exclusively, is just far superior to other parts of the world, which you would expect. These are emerging economies. These are countries that haven't had the innovation that we have. And so when we look at this chart, we can see that VTI over time, from a performance standpoint, is substantially a better investment. However, will that be the case for the long term? That is to be determined. I think there's a lot of uncertainty out there around the strength of the US economy and our politics and how we get along as a society and how that can impact our companies and markets compared to other places where business could begin and thrive. And so it's something to keep an eye on, and you have a little bit less risk and more exposure in the VT ETF. So would I invest in VT or VTI? Well, as you probably know, if you watch this channel, I am heavily invested in VTI because I do believe in the United States. I do believe in our innovation and our democracy here, and just such an amazing track record of changing the world with the companies that we produce here and the things that we bring to the world. That's where I have most of my money concentrated. I have exposure to these emerging markets in a separate ETF, but I do not use VT as a primary investment for my portfolio right now. That does not mean you shouldn't consider doing so yourself, and hopefully this video helps you think through whether that is a decision you make or not. And that is it. Hey, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please again consider subscribing. I'd love to have you part of our community here as we share stories about personal finance and get better at investing together. I will talk to you in our next video. See you then. Thanks.